Item 40 of White Horse Live, coming to you from White Horse Black Mountain, hosted as always by Bob Hinkle and co-produced by White Horse Black Mountain and Rad House Studio. This afternoon, we welcome back pianist Dr. Daniel Weiser and cellist Franklin Keel for the final installment in this special three-part mini-series showcasing the cello and piano works of Beethoven in celebration of the 250th anniversary of his birth. We're very glad to be open again to the public, even though seating at White Horse is very limited due to ongoing COVID safety recommendations. So we'll continue to offer these programs as live online streams. Now more than ever, our artists rely on your tips. They can't hear your applause if you're watching this at home. Your tips are the way to show your appreciation for them. The best way to do that is to visit whitehorselive.tips in your web browser. Not .com, not tips.com, just whitehorselive.tips. And we'll display the tip jar address from time to time during the show, as we are now. Thank you for helping to make this series a success. We're grateful for your help in spreading the word. Please keep sharing the event notices, hosting live watch parties, and telling all your friends. Now here's your host, Bob Hinkle.
Hey everybody, thanks for being with us on a Sunday afternoon. When the song rises up, white horses fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. Well, if you don't believe that the music has some power, just stay right here with us for just about an hour. Oh, Daniel and Franklin, they gonna lift you up. They will loosen up your tightening. They will fill your cup. When the song rises up, white horses fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. Then the clouds roll away. Then the clouds roll away. All right. Now, the company that Dan Weiser has founded and been sort of keeping alive by the skin of its nose for the last several years is Amici Music. As I say, Dr. Daniel Weiser is the founder and the artistic director, and he's been bringing chamber music to White Horse Black Mountain for 11 years now. Each concert has been uniquely wonderful. One of Dr. Weiser's thoughts with Amici has been to bring the music to places where it's not usually played. That certainly includes a former Chevy dealership like us. I never forget the first concert that we had. It featured two operatic sopranos. In an effort to define ourselves, the concert was called Divas and Drafts. An older fellow with a long beard who was sitting at the bar with his overalls, his baseball cap, and his work boots approached me after the concert, and he said something like this with a big smile. He said, "You know, I didn't think I liked classical music, but sitting here listening to those pretty ladies with a beer in my hand sitting at this bar, I have decided I like it pretty well." Then I knew Amici and White Horse were on to something. This afternoon is the third of three concerts comprising the complete piano and cello works of Ludwig van Beethoven. We'll feature Dr. Weiser on piano and the extraordinary cello artistry of Franklin Keel. It's our 250th birthday wish to the great composer, and these 3 days have become known as the first and hopefully the last COVID-19 Beethoven Festival. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and dogs, guppies and goldfish, and anybody else out there on the couch that I forgot, please, if you would, a warm virtual White Horse Live round of applause for the man of few words, Dr. Daniel Weiser.
Thank you. Thank you to Bob for keeping White Horse alive. This is one of our first homes after I started Amici Music, and I knew this was a place that we had to come after COVID ends. I hope you can all make it down to Black Mountain and visit White Horse. It's a special place, just an incredible place with great vibes in it. all kinds of music is played here, and Bob was willing to put up a little try with this classical music, and we've been doing it for 11 years now, even during COVID. So we thank Bob, and we also thank Rebecca from the Rod House Studios that's sort of formed a partnership here now so we can do these great live streams, and her crew, all women crew, by the way, who do the videography and the sound. Fantastic work. Really, somebody who saw the show last night wrote in and said he'd never seen some of the great video work that goes on here. So it's pretty radical, revolutionary stuff going here in Little Black Mountain. And speaking of radical and revolutionary, we're playing some Beethoven, and he was an incredible revolutionary. It's almost hard to think back of what he did to music, but he altered almost everything about how we hear music, how it's composed. He was a product of the French Revolution. We have to remember that comes out of 1789. The whole social system sort of breaks apart there. And Beethoven, as a 19-year-old boy, was there and just saw the potentials of what could happen now that they didn't have to have patrons and the aristocrats. He wanted to reach the people himself. And there's a wonderful quote by Igor Stravinsky, the great Russian composer, who described this. He said the following: Beethoven is the friend and contemporary of the French Revolution, and he remained faithful to it even when, during the Jacobin dictatorship, humanitarians with weak nerves of the Schiller type turned away from it, preferring to destroy tyrants on the theatrical stage with the help of cardboard swords. Beethoven, that plebeian genius who proudly turned his back on emperors, princes, and magnates, that is the Beethoven we love for his unassailable optimism, his virile sadness, for the inspired pathos of his struggle, and for his iron will, which enabled him to seize destiny by the throat. And in this concert, the last of these, we're going to hear his last two sonatas, which were written in 1815. So far, we've heard those early sonatas from the early phase, then his more heroic phase. But Beethoven begins to really explore what music really is in these last sonatas. And he doesn't really care if there's a tune. This is not stuff that you're going to be singing in the shower. This is really just him taking a little kernel, a little motive, and exploring all the different ways that that motive can take a journey. And sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't. And he could care less whether it did to you. There's so many great quotes, and what he does also is expand what is capable, what is potential for the performers. So much of what he writes, we look at him and we're like, that's impossible to play. But as he was famous for once saying to a violinist who complained about one of his pieces and it was too hard, he said, "I know that God is nearer to me than to all others. Do you believe that I ever think of a wretched fiddle when he is speaking to me?" And it really does seem that God is pouring through a Beethoven in all of these works, and we have to go along for the ride and figure it out no matter what. And so hopefully Franklin, who's just a wonderful colleague, has put up trying to do, this is a momentous thing to try to do all these Beethoven sonatas and his variations in a few days. So I really thank him for doing this. But our job is to try to make this music come alive and understandable, and hopefully you'll grasp it as we do it. Now, before we get to those last two sonatas, and we're going to start off with one last variation that we have not done, which actually comes from that earlier period, from 1796, when he was actually writing those first two sonatas. In fact, he probably wrote this piece on that same trip to Berlin, where he got to play with this wonderful cellist, Jean-Louis Duport, who was a phenomenal virtuoso and gave Beethoven all these new ideas of what was capable on the cello. And so he decided to write this variations on a theme by George Frederick Handel. It's from the oratorio Judas Maccabeus. The aria is called "See the Conquering Hero Comes." I don't think it was by coincidence that Beethoven saw himself as the conquering hero coming to Berlin and is taking it by storm. You will probably recognize this tune if you've been to church at Easter time. It's better known as the hymn, "Thine Be the Glory." But this was a very popular tune, and Beethoven loved Handel. We think about Beethoven's love for the fugues and Bach, and we'll hear that at the last movement of the D major sonata as well. But Bach actually was sort of not as well known at this time. His music sort of got lost. Handel was actually much more popular during Beethoven's life. And Beethoven said a couple of wonderful quotes. He said, "Go to Handel, to learn how to achieve great effects by such simple means. And then he later said, Handel is the greatest composer that ever lived. I would uncover my head and kneel down on his tomb. That's very, very rare for Beethoven to be saying, because he certainly thought he was the greatest composer that ever lived. And there, one last quote, apparently on his deathbed, when somebody was showing him an edition of Handel's works, he just said 4 words, "There is the truth." So there was great love for what Handel did, and Beethoven, in this more classical form, takes this wonderful tune, very classical and very structured, and takes it on a wonderful journey that will hope you enjoy. Here is a variations on Handel's Judas Maccabeus, written by Beethoven in 1796. All right, now we talked a little bit yesterday how right after he had gotten back from this trip to Berlin, he had a fever, high fever, and he began to, at the first time, feel these ringing and buzzing in his ear. Over the next few years, he thought at first that it was going to go away, that it was part of, he had digestive problems, his doctors kept saying it was related to that, but it never went away. And yesterday I talked about his Heiligenstadt Testament, where he goes to this little village of Heiligenstadt in 1802 and writes this very powerful letter to his brothers that he never sends, at the end of which he said, "How humiliated I felt when somebody standing beside me heard the sound of a flute in the distance, and I heard nothing. Or somebody heard a shepherd sing, and again I heard nothing. Such experiences put me to the point of putting an end to my life. The only thing that held me back was my art. It seemed to me impossible to leave this world before I had produced all the works that I felt the urge to compose." So he pulls himself back from the brink there, and over the next several years, basically 10 years, from 1803 to 1813, he enters that second phase of his life, the heroic phase as it's called, where he writes most of the great masterpieces, the Fifth Symphony, the Sixth Symphony, Appassionata, Waldstein Sonata, just so many of the great works of Western civilization come out of those 10 years when Beethoven decides he's not going to hide anymore. He's going to seize destiny by the throat and just alter what music is all about. He made us listen to him with the power of his music. Not always despairing, although there was a lot of tragic music in that. Yesterday we played the A major sonata right out of that period, which is a very joyful piece in many ways, but it is that the epic nature that Beethoven is going after. Now in 1815, all through this time, of course, the Napoleonic Wars are going on. Napoleon is moving into Austria at times, taking over Vienna. And in fact, Beethoven's opera Leonora, which premieres in 1805, is a miserable failure, largely because everyone has left Vienna, and the only people left are the French soldiers, and they don't really want to hear this opera. So it really did affect Beethoven. And ultimately, even though he admired Napoleon for what he did, in fact, at times he thought he was the Napoleon of music. He was going to take it by force. But once Napoleon, and he loved the fact that Napoleon was liberating a lot of people, he didn't like the fact that Napoleon put a crown on his head and made himself emperor. And of course, at that point, he scratches out the dedication to the Third Symphony, which was supposed to be the Bonaparte Symphony, and he calls it instead the Heroica Symphony to honor the loss of a man and a hero. All through this time, yesterday we talked about Beethoven's search for a good wife. We played the variations of the Mozart from Papageno as he sings about having a wife, and Pamino sings about the glories of married life. But it was never going to be for Beethoven. But there was one woman that seemed to have been the one, and is known as the Immortal Beloved. We still don't actually know who this Immortal Beloved is, though I have a pretty good idea, and many scholars sort of think so. This letter was, again, something that either wasn't sent or was sent to a woman and then was sent back so that they didn't have any trouble. We know that it was sent, he didn't date the letter, which of course made it very confusing for many years. It's dated Monday, July 6th, but there's no year. So the first biographers thought it was 1805, and they thought that this letter was written to Giulietta Guicciardi, who we talked about yesterday as the woman who he dedicated the Moonlight Sonata. By lots of different things, we know that the letter was actually written in 18 1912, and it had to do with a trip that Beethoven took first to Prague and then to Carlsbad, and he seems to have met up with a woman, his immortal beloved, and probably consummated a little relationship there. And then this letter was written a few days after that with the kind of anticipation that maybe this woman would come and be with him. Let me read a little bit of it because it is so effusively Beethoven-esque in his writing. This is from July 6th. My angel, my all, my very self. Why this deep sorrow when necessity speaks? Can our love endure except through sacrifices, through not demanding everything from one another? Can you change the fact that you are not wholly mine, I not wholly thine? Which seems to imply she might be with somebody else. O God, look out into the beauties of nature and comfort your heart with that which must be. Love demands everything. Thus it is to me with you and to you with me. But you forget so easily that I must live for me and for you. If we were wholly united, you will feel the pain of it as little as I. Cheer up, my only treasure, my all. The gods must send us the rest. What for us must and shall be. He then continues the letter. Wherever I am, you are with me. I will arrange it with you and me that I can live with you. Much as you love me, I love you more. Do not ever conceal yourself from me. O God, so near, so far, is not our love a truly heavenly structure, as firm as the vault of heaven? And then he finishes it up the next morning, July 7th. Though still in bed, my thoughts go out to you, my immortal beloved. Now and then joyfully, then sadly, waiting to learn whether or not fate will hear us. I can live only with you or not at all. I am resolved to wander so long away from you until I can fly to your arms and say that I am really at home with you and can send my soul enwrapped in you into the land of spirits. Your love makes me at once the happiest and the unhappiest of men. At my age, I need a steady, quiet life. Can that be so with our connection? Oh, continue to love me. Never misjudge the most faithful heart of your beloved. Ever thine, ever mine, ever ours. Ludwig. So this has been one of the enduring mysteries of the Beethoven scholarship. Who is this immortal beloved? And there's a couple different possibilities. I believe it's this woman, Josephine Brunswick, who he had taught as a young, when she was a girl at around the same time. She was the cousin, actually, of Giulietta Guicciardi. He had fallen in love with her right away. She had married a much older man right at that time because I think her mother wanted to get her out of the way of Beethoven because she wanted her to marry a wealthy person. She has several children with that person, and then he died, this older person. Beethoven then moved in, and we know that there are some letters to Josephine that are very similar to these letters that were discovered later on with this sort of a great overpouring of love. But then she got married to somebody else, a really terrible marriage, and what happened, I think at least, is that she had left her husband at this time to come to be with Beethoven, but was feeling a little guilty about leaving her husband. Fascinatingly, there was a child born 9 months to the day after this, whose name was Minona, which if you spell backwards is anonyme. And the husband, Josephine's husband, kidnapped that child basically and brought her back to Estonia where he was living. It's a fascinating drama. I urge you to try to read up on it. But suffice it to say that Beethoven, at the time he's writing this piece in 1815, has gone through some of the throes of this incredible love. And you'll hear that in this fourth sonata. It's in C major, very beautiful, easygoing key. And it starts off again with this beautiful measure in the cello. It's only in 2 movements, although each movement feels like it's 4 actually, because there's a slow part and then a fast part in the first movement, and then there's a slow part and a fast part in the second movement as well. It's as if Beethoven just can't end movements. He just connects it all together. But there is just a great feeling of love in this. He may have still been searching and hoping, but it was never to be for Beethoven. So we want to play the fourth sonata in C major, written in 1815. This is Opus 102, number 1. Thank you. So you can certainly, I think, hear, that it's a much shorter pieces than any of the other sonatas he had done. He's just condensing everything, doesn't want to waste any notes, but just some very interesting moments of silence again, and you're not really sure where it's going. Beethoven is always trying to defy expectations and not write a full-out melody like that. And he goes even further in this next one that we're going to do. Just a couple more quotes, because as many of you know, I collect quotes about Beethoven. He has many great ones. He once said, music is a mediator between the spiritual and the sensual life. It is a higher revelation than all wisdom and philosophy. It is the one entrance into the higher world of knowledge, which comprehends mankind, but which mankind cannot comprehend. And I've said this one before, but it's one of my favorite ones. Prince Lichnowsky, who had been a big supporter of his, had wanted him to play at one of his parties where Beethoven was staying at his house. Beethoven didn't want to do that because there were actually some French military people there, didn't show up. Lichnowsky sent him a letter saying, "You missed the party," to which Beethoven replied in one of his great quotes. He said, "Dear Prince Lichnowsky, what you are by accident of birth. What I am by myself. There are and will be 1,000 princes. There is only one Beethoven." And so true. As Robert Schumann actually said, nature would burst should she attempt to produce nothing except Beethoven's. There is really just not enough room for it. And Friedrich Nietzsche, the great German philosopher, had a wonderful quote that really relates to this next piece we're going to do. He said, "Beethoven's music is music about music." And in so many ways, what we're going to hear next is going to take you on a pretty big exploration of life, I hope. And again, it's written around the same time in 1815. There was something else that happened during this year. Beethoven's brother, Karl, died at the end of the year. And Karl was married to this woman, Johanna, who Beethoven never liked. She had a reputation as kind of a big flirt. They had their child out of wedlock, their son Karl, and she had been accused of thievery as well. So Beethoven always sort of had these antipathies towards her, and Karl knew it. And as he's laying on his deathbed, he was trying to figure out how to give the guardianship of his child. Originally, he had actually said, written in his will, "Along with my wife, I appoint my brother Ludwig von Beethoven as co-guardian." But Beethoven, when he heard that, made him write the following instead: "I appoint my brother Ludwig van Beethoven as guardian." But then just a day before he died, he adds another codicil to his will, saying the following: "Having learned that my brother, Ludwig van Beethoven, desires after my death to take wholly to himself my son Karl, and wholly to withdraw him from the supervision and training of his mother, and inasmuch as the best of harmony does not exist between my brother and my wife, I have found it necessary to add to my will that I by no means desire that my son be taken away from his mother, but that he shall always, and so long as his future career permits, remain with his mother, to which end the guardianship of him is to be exercised by her as well as my brother." Unfortunately, at the time, men had a lot more power, and still, than women, and Beethoven, as a big name, was able to sort of work through the court system over the next 5 years. It kept going back and forth, but ultimately, Beethoven would get sole custody of his nephew, Karl. Now, it was a very difficult relationship. Karl, I think, wanted to be with his mother, but ended up sort of hanging out mostly with Beethoven. Beethoven tried to give him piano lessons with his student Czerny. Czerny said he was completely untalented. That must have driven Beethoven crazy. And they didn't really seem to have a great relationship, and ultimately, just a year before Beethoven dies, Karl actually tries to kill himself. He shoots himself in the head, but he misses, thankfully. And it seems clear that over those 5 years from 1815 to 1820, Beethoven did not write a lot of music. He was just embroiled in this horrible thing with his nephew and treated his sister-in-law just terribly. But he is able to write this fifth sonata right around this time. And it really does give a taste to his future works that he would write. Some of the more difficult works, the Grosse Fugue, this really denseness of concentration of musical thought. It's a rather thorny piece, as I say, kind of intellectual, unyielding in its pursuit of musical ideas at the expense of musical sentiment. We hear this first movement. That's a very short first movement. It sounds a bit like a drill sergeant beginning, yata-ta-ta-tum, a big fanfare out there. And it really does feel like a bit of that military. Again, this is right when Napoleon is being defeated, and he could have had that sense in his head. There's a beautiful slow movement. It's really the only one that's fully a slow movement in all the Beethoven sonatas. One of the most beautiful movements he wrote. It starts off almost like a hymn, like a chorale, but then it gets rather dark and dirge-like, almost funereal, as maybe Beethoven is thinking it's coming to an end. Again, he probably could hear very little of this piece, if any at all. By this time, he had gone almost completely deaf. And there are some who attribute the fact that this is so thorny and some of the musical lines don't seem to line up well with the fact that maybe he couldn't even hear it. But I do think he was on to something a little deeper, especially as we enter that third movement, which has a wonderful opening, comes right out of the second movement. Franklin starts just playing a little scale. He's sort of searching for himself. Then I play the scale. And then that scale becomes the subject of this incredible fugue, really a double fugue that would happen, where, of course, Beethoven goes back to his Bach love and just takes us on a journey that I'm not sure I understand, but it's a fascinating journey to take, and it just sort of keeps going and going until finally at the end he's like, I'm done. He puts the two instruments in unison and ends with a big crashing ending. So it's a fantastic work. I hope you feel the spirit of Beethoven alive in this. One last quote, my favorite quote about Beethoven. This is Thomas Pynchon in the book Gravity's Rainbow. He said, "You know, a person feels good listening to Rossini, but all you feel like after listening to Beethoven is going out and invading Poland." You might feel like invading Poland after this piece, because there is something about it, this strident nature to it. Here is the final sonata that Beethoven wrote. Again, whitehorselive.tips. Please give if you can. It goes to the musicians. It goes also to the White Horse, to the Rat House Studios for everything they do. We certainly hope to be back here. It's going to be a little bit dependent on how the COVID goes here over the next several months. But I do want you, if you're interested in more Amici music programs, go to amicimusic.org, AMICI music among friends. I'm actually going to be doing, from Baltimore where I live, all of the Beethoven violin sonatas coming up in December. So we're not done with Beethoven. I think he really deserves a full year of this, but he was robbed by the pandemic. So we're going to keep him going through the end. Just one of our greatest composers, filled with so many great thoughts. Here is the D major sonata, opus 102, number 2. Thank you all. Thank you for everybody who's here. Thank you to the White Horse. Thank you all who've been watching. Thanks to Beethoven above all. Thank you all.
Thank you, Daniel. Now, this was wonderful. This was like something very special. When the song rises up, white horses fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. Daniel and Franklin and Beethoven were the vessels here this time. We hope that you enjoyed it, maybe had a glass of wine. We hope that you were able to let go of yourself. We hope that we helped you take your joy down off the shelf. When the song rises up, white horses fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. Sisters, ain't you glad you feel that fear fading? Brothers, ain't you glad there's gonna be a better day? People, ain't you glad we're shoring this together? People, ain't you glad that the cloud's gonna roll away? Yes, the cloud's gonna roll away. The cloud's going to roll away. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here, being out there in live stream land, or the few that were able to be here with us. Some of you who have been to Whitehorse before, you know that we have this, maybe you're familiar with the Between the Cushions Worldwide contest that we have. We'll pick it up again next week, so keep looking between those cushions and hang on to anything that you find. Elvis Presley cassettes, yesterday's face mask. However, if you find a favorite pair of underwear, put it somewhere safe. You don't want to have to explain how it got there. Stay safe, take great care, and remember the wisdom of the ages. He who hesitates is either drunk or stoned. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for White Horse Live. We sure hope you've enjoyed the show and the mini-series. And for those of you here in person, thanks for joining us here at White Horse, you small but mighty crowd of stalwarts. This program is produced by White Horse Black Mountain and by Rad House Studio. Bob Hinkle is your host and executive producer. Claire Hoke is audio engineer. Jessica Wharton is director of photography. Jessica Fox is key grip and front of house engineer. Public relations services provided by Maggie Rainwater at Hoosier Devil. I'm Rebecca Hillgraves, director and producer for these programs. Thanks as always to Nathan Kirkley, who keeps things running smoothly behind the White Horse Bar, and to Craig Rumney, the Craigerator, who welcomes folks at the box office and keeps smiling no matter what. Join us Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern for jazz saxophone phenomenon Zoe Hamrick. You might call her our sax symbol, right here on White Horse Live. In the meantime, Be good to each other, and that includes all people.